The trick to lasting at the top isn't outrunning time. It's learning to play a different game while everyone thinks they're watching the same one. Luka Modric's story starts far from packed stadiums. He grew up in war-torn Croatia, learning early that survival takes calm under pressure and quick decisions with few options. Those years gave him a trait he never lost. He never rushed, even when everything around him did. At Dinamo Zagreb, he was the small, wiry creator who could dribble past a man and find a final pass. He went on loan, grew stronger in the corners of rough matches, and came back with more than technique. He had a sense for when to speed up play and when to slow it to a halt, like a hand on a dial. When he crossed to England in 2008, the Premier League challenged him in a new way. It was quicker, heavier, and unforgiving. At first, he played as a left-sided playmaker. Then Harry Redknapp pulled him in field. That small change pushed Modrić to see the whole pitch at once and begin the first big adaptation of his career. Less dribbling for dribbling's sake, more control of space and rhythm. Real Madrid came in 2012, and with it the biggest microscope in football. The start wasn't smooth. He arrived late in the summer, the team was already set, and a poll called him the worst signing of the season. He didn't panic. He kept the ball, showed up for the pass, and waited for the game to bend his way. By 2013-14, under Carlo Ancelotti, you can see the shift. Modrić stopped being a classic number 10 hunting the final ball, and became the metronome beside players like Xabi Alonso and Ángel Di Maria. He set traps with his positioning, drew pressure, and then used one touch to move the entire block of the opposition. It led to La Decima, Real Madrid's long-awaited 10th European Cup, and to a new identity for him. Not a luxury player, but the hinge of a system. The next phase of his career came with another adjustment. Toni Kroos arrived, Casemiro developed, and the famous midfield trio formed. Modrić had to balance a German passer's calm with a Brazilian destroyer's range. Again, he adapted, finding pockets where he could steal a yard, offer a wall pass, and glide into the next angle. The dribbles got shorter, the touches quicker, the choices cleaner. As the seasons rolled on, the physical demands of the role rose. He didn't try to sprint more, he learned to sprint less and better. You could watch him pause, scan, and take 2 light steps to set a trap, then explode 5 yards to nick the ball, not 20 yards to chase it. Small changes like that, made over and over, preserved the legs and sharpened the mind. By his early 30s, something else had changed. Modrić stopped chasing the spotlight and started controlling the temperature of whole matches. He'd tilt his hips to show a pressing forward one path, then nudge the pass where that path closed, making the pressure his ally. He lived on the half-turn, showed the sole of his boot when needed, and always seemed to open a window that others couldn't see. The results were visible in big nights. In 2018, when he won the Ballon d'Or, it wasn't because he ran the fastest. It was because he read the match like a long book and was always on the right page. He took Croatia to a World Cup final with endless running and small, tidy passes that kept his team brave when the stakes were highest. Getting older didn't slow the mind that made those choices. It refined it. In 2022, at 36, he produced one of the Champions League's defining moments. Down against Chelsea, he bent an outside-of-the-boot pass into Rodrigo's stride, a single touch that broke all the tension in the stadium. It was the work of someone who measures power and angle and risk in the space of a heartbeat, and trusts the muscle memory built over 2 decades. Age forced him to be selective. He learned when to ask for the ball and when to direct play with a gesture, when to lead a press and when to drop 5 yards to close a passing lane that would never show up on a highlight reel. He accepted rest when it helped, picked his bursts, and used the bench as a tool rather than a slight. Those choices kept him fresh for the moments that defined seasons. For Croatia at the 2022 World Cup, he was no longer the young runner. He was the compass. In tight games that drifted into extra time, he walked teammates through each phase, pointing, clapping, and then stepping in to make the third man run, or the calm clearance that steadied everyone's breathing. That tournament ended with a bronze medal, and yet another lesson. Leadership is part of adaptation too. Technically, his changes were subtle but constant. He took fewer touches in tight areas, yet each one protected the ball better. He relied more on angles than feints, more on the body block than the burst. The famous outside of the boot pass stayed, but it became a tool for sudden acceleration of play, not a flourish. The first control always seemed to put the defender on his back foot. Over time, Modrić reshaped the idea of what longevity looks like in midfield. It wasn't a story of preserving youth. It was a craftsperson refining tools, sanding off risk, finding simpler lines through complicated pictures. He leaned on preparation, on studying opponents, on counting steps between markers, and on the humility to keep updating a game that had already earned him everything. This is why, late in his 30s, he still mattered in the matches that decide trophies. He didn't need 10 brilliant minutes to win a game. He needed 2 or 3 right decisions at the right time, and the credibility to make everyone around him follow the rhythm he set. That, in the end, is how you don't just last, you lead. The clearest proof came on those spring nights when the Champions League tightens around you like a vice. Madrid were older in some spots, younger in others, and still carrying a belief that wasn't fantasy, it was muscle memory. Modrić read those games the way a pilot reads cloud layers, feeling for lift, avoiding turbulence, nudging everyone towards safer air. He didn't go looking for the heroic run. He waited for the moment that would move the whole picture. Against Chelsea in 2022, that moment was a pass most players can't even see, let alone execute under pressure. Madrid were wobbling, the tie slipping, and you could feel the stadium tense with each lost duel. Modrić collected the ball with one touch to settle it, and another to open his hips, not for a shot, but for that outside of the boot curve he's made his signature. It bent away from the defenders and onto Rodrigo's stride as if guided by wire. One motion, and the tie wasn't dead anymore. What struck teammates and opponents wasn't the flair. It was the calculation behind the flair. He knew the back line was squeezing narrow to cut the obvious routes, so the only safe delivery had to start wide and come back in. He also knew Rodrigo's acceleration timing because they drilled it. The pass looked like art, but it was really homework made visible. That spring turned into a series of rescues because he kept finding the switch that turned panic into patience. He'd show for the ball when a teammate needed a simple answer, then leave space for a runner the next time, so patterns never grew stale. He bothered opposing midfielders by stepping just close enough to hurry them without blowing himself up for the next phase. When the game tilted against Madrid, he didn't chase it. He tilted it back. To keep doing that at 36, 37, he trimmed the parts of his game that cost too much fuel and sharpened the ones that paid the biggest dividend. Fewer carries over long distances. More two-touch sequences that broke a press with angles instead of power. He protected his legs with recovery he used to shrug off, and he got stingy about the sprints he would spend. If he ran hard, it was to stop a counter at birth or to join a move he already knew had numbers. Training changed too, but not in a flashy way. He kept the ball close, worked balance and core, and drilled little movements that look like nothing until you realize they save you half a step 50 times a match. He stayed late to connect with the kids who were learning his language while bringing their own. Camavinga's first love is the surge, Tchouaméni's is the intercept, Valverde loves the gallop. Modrić figured out how to make their strengths meet him where his game now lived. And then, every few months, he stepped back into the other jersey and recalibrated for a different kind of pressure. With Croatia in Qatar at 37, he didn't pretend to be who he was at 27. He rationed his bursts, closed passing lanes like a door quietly swung to, and talked. A lot. When extra time arrived, he looked the same as he had in the first minute, not because he's fresher, but because he had managed the moments that sap you. That tournament ran on courage and goalkeeping, yes, but also on a midfield that refused to give the match the rhythm the opponent wanted. Modrić set traps by the yard rather than the tackle. He guided younger legs through waves, kept heads clear during VAR delays and penalty shootouts, and reminded everyone that timing can be a kind of stamina. Third place didn't come from a miracle day. It came from 90, then 120 minutes at a time, managed by a captain who knew what his team could endure. Back in Madrid, the club was turning a page without ever saying it out loud. New energy arrived, and with it, new roles. He didn't kick against the calendar. Some nights he started and stitched the game together early. Other nights he came in to settle storms and finish the job. The ego check is real for players who've lived at the center. He made it look like another decision, not a demotion. What didn't change was his authority when games got late and narrow. With 10 minutes left, a one-goal match can become pure chaos if someone doesn't keep count. He was the one still measuring the risk of a forward pass against the cost of losing it, still nudging a teammate 5 yards left to turn a passing lane into a wall. Coaches talk about managing the final 15. He did it from the inside, with the ball and without it. By then, his trademark outside of the boot ball wasn't just a trick to make crowds sing. It was a tool to spare himself yards of running. Instead of driving into a crossing zone, he could deliver to the far post from a safer pocket, curving around shoulders, skipping past boots. Every time he took the long route off his legs and laid it onto the ball, he added another week to his season. Over a year, that adds up to months. He also learned to let other people's form carry him when it made sense. When a young winger went hot, he fed him. When a striker needed one chance early to settle his night, he'd spend his focus there and ask for less later. He turned the game into a negotiation he could win without breaking himself. The thrill didn't leave the way he played. The urgency did, and that's what lengthened his runway. All of it folds into a larger truth that separates the ones who fade from the ones who last. You can't beat time, but you can make it a partner. He did it by choosing when to speed the pulse and when to slow it, by understanding that a match's story is a thing you can still write at minute 85 if you've kept some ink in the pen. It's not romance, it's craft. And when trophies kept finding him, it wasn't fate rewarding a legend. It was a pattern repeating because the habits behind it were still alive. He led by example once, racing to every fire. Later he led by temperature, keeping the room right when others started to sweat. That's adapting with age at the highest level. Not by shrinking your role, but by changing what leadership looks like when the legs are lighter and the mind is heavier with experience. After the fireworks of 2018, the game didn't slow down for him. Seasons stack quickly in Madrid, and you don't get a grace period just because you've climbed a mountain. There was a wobble, a change of managers, and a dressing room that needed steadiness more than speeches. He kept offering the same thing he'd always brought, just delivered differently. Less sprint, more steering. The pandemic season asked for another adjustment. Empty seats echo differently than a full Bernabeu, and the rhythm of football without a crowd can drift. He tightened his passes, shortened the moves, and helped Real Madrid win La Liga by treating every sound of the ball like a cue in a metronome. He wasn't the first into every duel now. He was the one placing teammates into the duels that mattered. The little things changed too. Those lung-bursting late runs into the box became earlier checks over his shoulder and a half-step drop to receive, facing forward. He scanned more, burst less. He waited one extra moment to invite a press, then turned it into a gap for a fullback to slide through. It's the difference between being the tempo and being the conductor holding the baton. By the time Europe came calling again in 2022, he built a habit of saving his sharpest edges for when the game tilted. Paris in the round of 16, London in the quarterfinals, Manchester in the semis, every tie felt like walking a cliff path in the dark. He didn't panic. Against Chelsea, with Real on the ropes and the minutes slipping, he picked a pass that looked like an artist signing a canvas. Outside of the boot, bending around blue shirts, into the one space Rodrigo could attack, and the ball met the run like they'd agreed on it days before. People called it magic. He called it muscle memory. Years of that same touch in training, same angle, same weight, now executed with the nerve of a man who knows the moment isn't bigger than the technique. It pulled Madrid level on the night, pushed the tie to extra time, and turned a downhill slide into another climb. In Manchester, when chaos tried to flood the midfield, he did something that doesn't show up on many highlight reels. He made the game small. 2 touches, then a foul 1. A switch of play, then hands up, palms down, telling the line to breathe. Younger legs flew around him. He drew the lines they ran along. Every comeback needed a spark. He made sure there was still oxygen for the spark to catch. The final in Paris against Liverpool wasn't a showpiece for him. It was a night for control, spacing, and denial. He slid 5 yards left or right and erased passing lanes that top strikers feast on. He picked the moments to carry the ball, then put it down like a mason adding the last stone to a wall. When the whistle went, he held his 5th European Cup at Madrid, each one earned from a different version of himself. He carried that same blend of pride and restraint into Qatar later that year. 37 years old, chasing shadows in the heat with a new generation at his shoulder. Croatia doesn't win with speed, they win with stubborn shape and exquisite timing, and he was the hinge. Against Brazil, he shuffled the deck just enough, slowing when Brazil wanted fast, speeding up when they missed a step, and sent the tie into penalties where nerve becomes skill. A few days later, Argentina ended the run, and he didn't pretend otherwise. They regrouped, won a 3rd-place match, and he walked off with a medal he'd never collected before, and the respect of a tournament that knows how rare that kind of longevity is. Back in Madrid after a winter like that, the price is always paid in the legs. He accepted a rotation that would have embarrassed him 10 years earlier, and turned it into a platform. New energy arrived. New roles shifted. He didn't fight the minutes, he fought for their quality. He put his hand up when the game asked for experience, and he sat down when the game needed thunder. Offers came from far away, with promises of sunsets and soft landings. He said no. Not because the league didn't tempt him, not because rest wasn't deserved, but because the conversation inside him hadn't finished yet. He still felt he could change a match in Spain and in Europe, with a pass, with a pause, with a piece of judgment that looks simple until you try it. In 2023-2024, there were throws back to the old hunger. A long-range winner on a tight Madrid night that kept a title charge steady. Cameos that looked small on the team sheet but felt big in the minutes when the stadium held its breath. He lived both sides of age in one evening, stepping up first in a penalty shootout and seeing his kick saved, then standing in the huddle as younger teammates converted and the goalkeeper turned into a wall. He took the lesson the way a veteran does: lead by going again, even when you've just come up short. The final at Wembley was another chapter in the same book. He didn't need to start to leave fingerprints. He came on, closed space, offered angles, and kept the ball secure against nerves that make even elite players hurry. When the ribbons went on the cup he'd lifted a 6th time, he didn't jump highest, and he didn't need to. He looked like a man measuring the distance he'd traveled, from a kid in Zadar juggling a ball through war, to a veteran in white, treating pressure like a familiar room. And then the summer of 2024 gave him a different test with Croatia, a group stage match that swung from heartache to hope and back again. He had a penalty saved, and seconds later scored from open play, becoming the oldest scorer in the tournament's history. It should have been a perfect story. Instead, a late equalizer sent Croatia home on a rulebook tiebreak, and he did what captains do in moments like that. He found the youngest face near him and put a hand on his shoulder. That's the other side of adapting with age. It's not just knowing where to stand or when to pass. It's knowing that control has limits and dignity doesn't. He walked off that pitch with a stitched-together smile and the same promise he's kept for years. Show up, think clearly, and give the best of what you have today, even when today asks for something different than yesterday. Back in Madrid again, another contract signed for 1 more year. The cycle continues. He can't outrun time, and he knows it better than anyone. So he keeps moving the target. 1 more clever turn, 1 more well-judged foul, 1 more perfectly weighted ball drawing a teammate into daylight. The legs have changed. The mind has sharpened to meet them. And in a sport